morning once again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another series of Putra by the School of Graduate Studies. Of course, we know them for always ensuring quality in postgraduate education. So far, we've been in the workshop. We've been attending this or going through the workshop, good practice in supervising postgraduate students. This morning we'll be going into another module. For those that were with us yesterday, we had the first and second module. Yesterday morning was the first one. In the afternoon we had the second one. For those that were there yesterday, we could testify to how interesting and educative the seminar, the workshop was. This morning we'll be going into publishing from the PhD. And in this session, we'll look at how to encourage and enable PhD students to work on elements of their research and writing to submit publication. We also consider co-authoring with candidates and how they can work to finance their work for publication. This workshop is designed to help universities, students, to 1, selecting the right element for research, 2, encouraging students for a fine work of publication that is marketable, and finally, responding to reviews. To anchor this morning session, module this morning, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Professor Gina Wisker. Let's put our hands together for her, please. And she will be anchoring this morning session. With her we have Dr. Gillian Robinson. Let's put our hands together for her. She's seated here. But this morning session will be anchored by Professor Gina Wisker, and I'd like to give a little introduction for those who don't know her about Professor Gina Wisker. Professor Gina Wisker has worked in educational development since the early 1980s, initially in a previous role at Anglia Ruskin University, where she also coordinated women's studies and taught English. Professor Gina completed a PhD at Nottingham University, where she worked on a study of representation of self in contemporary English and American fiction. And followed that with 3 years at the Center for Higher Educational Studies, Institute of Education, London University, as the researcher for the inquiry into the role of external examiner. She received a title, Professor of Higher Education and Contemporary Literature. Let's put our hands together for Professor Gina Wisker as she comes to the microphone.
Well, this is very grand, so I hope we can all live up to it. Okay. I've been doing this session in lots of different contexts since I was first asked to run one for the University of Southampton, and I've worked with early career researchers, and I've also taken it to New Zealand quite recently, because it seems to me that what you're really concerned with, apart from getting the PhD finished, is getting it out there and getting it published and enabling people to read it and enabling people to use it so that they go off and do interesting things, having read your contribution to knowledge. So when I did my PhD, we won't talk about what year it was, there was no expectation that I would publish from it at all. In fact, I was told, don't spend your time trying to publish, you've got to get the PhD done. So it was actually completely the other way around from how it is now, because now you're told, get things out as soon as possible, when they're ready, not too early, but you must publish from the PhD. And maybe while you're doing it, the Scandinavian model, we'll talk about this more formally, the Scandinavian model is quite often 4 published articles, and then a wrap that pulls them all together with a theory and with an argument. And I think that, having just examined one of those PhDs from Finland, that struck me as a much harder PhD than the one that I did, which was just a monograph with no compulsion to publish. So today we're going to think, what can you publish from your PhD? We'll think a bit about breaking writing blocks, because that happens to anyone who's writing. And we're also going to look online where you might find some journals and find out how to write for those particular journals, because some of this is about you as a writer, and some of it is about the politics of journals and publishing. So we're going to do a bit of work online as well, or finding things. Okay. Anyone got one of those? It's in the garage. That's where I work. I don't work at Anglia Ruskin anymore. I've been at Brighton for 8 years. Anybody been to Brighton? Brighton on the South Sea coast in Britain. Always warm and sunny. Thank you, a couple of people. No sand, very little sun. That's an amazingly sunny day. Choice day, probably the 6th of June. Normally freezing rain, but it's very nice. It's great fun. I like it. That's where I had my PhD externally examined. King's College, not in the chapel, to the right-hand side. So just to think about the history of things, I've ended up in Brighton, not on the end of the pier, but my external examiner and I sat and had a 2-hour chat on our own on about the second floor, 5 windows along. Very eminent person. Actually, he advised me on the first thing that I published, rather than my supervisor. He just said, go for it. And he had a look at what I wrote after I finished and said, that looks as good as anything else that's in that journal. Well, that was my advice. Okay, very helpful though, because he knew what he was talking about. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is to think for a minute, and if you have a neighbour, turn to your neighbour. You know we do this. Why are you interested in publishing from the PhD? And what do you want from this session? So you're going to have 2 minutes. Write something down and speak to someone, even if you have to turn round. Why are you interested in publishing from the PhD? And have you got any interest, any issues or outcomes for this session? Think about it. Okay, that's got you thinking about it. Let's see what you said. Why do you want to do this? Yep.
Good morning, everybody. So the first thing, which is very important, is contribution to the field. In fact, I want to make it popular to everybody to know what I got through my PhD through this journey, 3-4 years, and what is important about it, compare it with other findings of other maybe research or articles, and find out what are the differences and similarities. Maybe, for example, there are differences in gender, differences in the nationalities, and geographical.
Okay, that's lots of things. Fit it into other people's work. If you do that, for this it'll take ages. And thank you very much. Contribution to the field. Otherwise, you do it, and what happens to your PhD is what happened to my PhD. It's in my sitting room, and occasionally I dust it. I published one thing from it. Terrible. However, it influenced everything I've done since, but... Okay, another reason? Why do we want to do this? Yeah? Thanks.
In addition to contribution, maybe we would like to influence in a specific our audience in a specific field. For example, if as a student we work, for example, in the field of psychological well-being, maybe we we want to people learn about and influence them about this concept.
So whatever you're doing, you wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't important and if other people couldn't benefit from it. And so if it does just sit on the shelf like mine does, then that's pretty pointless. So what you can do is have an influence in a field, perhaps throughout your whole future direction, your roles, your academic jobs, whatever you're going to do in your career. But you can influence a field. If you publish, you can influence people. If you don't publish, they don't know about it.
And also this leads to increasing the self-belief of the students, because after 4 years we can improve even our self-esteem, our confidence as a researcher, that for the first time we are going to publish our field.
Absolutely. It's good for you because you get self-esteem from it. Thank you. One more. It's compulsory. Yes, all right. And you had one.
Yeah, we talked about something here. We said criticism and response from the...
Well, why is that useful? Because none of us like criticism. Why do you want to put it out to somebody other than your supervisor? What do we want reviewers and criticism for? Sorry? Recognition. Sorry? Developing? Improving. Yeah. The process of getting a publication out while you're still doing the PhD, just like the process of getting published after you've done your PhD, or if you never do a PhD, is you're going to get peer response from respectable people in the field. Somebody else is reading it and considering it as able to enter the field. And they're going to give you, you hope, positive, constructive, developmental criticism, which will help you improve. Okay. Yeah.
I think one important point has been finished. They'll just talk about the competing and contributing to the field and whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the main important things of getting, for example, PhD or higher education is that you sell yourself. Marketing. If you are not able to find out a very good employer to be interested in you, or working place of the university lecturer or in the laboratory, whatever it is, what it is on this PhD. So this is the way that you are going to show yourself how you are powerful.
If you don't publish, when people come to hire you, they can't find you anywhere, and they've no idea that what you've done has made any kind of impact. So I'd say the publication is only one stage along that route, because we need to know, and this is harder, if other people have used our work when it's been published. It's just getting it out there is essential, but I would say you must now find out, has it been useful? Has it been used? But for marketing yourself, it's an indication that you have done something and that you're in there, you're in the game, you're ready to be employed. It wasn't like that when I did my PhD. And I'm sure Jill would say the same thing. But it's like that now, and we have to be a lot more hard-edged. Okay, let's have a look at what we've got then. Other people said they're interested in sharing it with critical friends. They're interested in publishing with their supervisors. They feel they're butchering their PhDs into a publication shape. It's not your PhD that you get published. It's something that's publishable in a journal. It's not exactly the same thing. They've commented on timing, get the right bit out at the right time, things about copyright, other people writing things. And some people said they had no pressure or support to publish. When they do that in the UK, I quote Malaysia, and this is true, Malaysia and Scandinavia, because it's here and Scandinavia and nowhere else that I know about where you are actually expected to publish. In fact, it is compulsory while you're doing your PhD. Trust me, it's not compulsory in the UK. So when they say, well, no, I'm not going to bother, I say, if you're in Malaysia or Finland, you would have to bother. it really matters. So it's different. But I know your system because we heard about it 4 years ago. Okay, why do you want to do it? Professionals will help you improve your work. It's about your professional accountability and track record. This is what other people have said. It means your work is good. If you get it published, it's a sign of its worth because it's been through that kind of critical review of those other people who are experts in the field. And you start to build up layers of elements of your work in a larger life project. You get a readership, and it's a route into academia. Right, things that other people have said then, which resonate with what you just said. There's been some research on this, but there's not been a lot of research on this. And we've done a little bit of research on this. So I could lead you to an article about reviewers that I got published in November. And one of the people I spoke to at that point, who's a South African academic, talked about doctoral candidates publishing and said, doctoral candidates who publish on early phases of their work, it moves them ahead quite substantially. Their identity shifts to one of, now I am a researcher. There's no doubt in my mind that publication is central to being an academic. And that's in a system where it isn't compulsory. So this particular person in this piece of research that we did says, you know, it's essential. And it moves you on as somebody who feels, okay, I'm a slightly different person now. It changes your identity. Canadian academic Anthony Paré, though, raises concerns about publishing too early because it can detract from the research momentum. And you might present work which isn't quite ready to share. And just to shift off for a minute, I edit a journal, an international journal in higher education, and I'll show you something about it later as an example of a journal you could write for. Not necessarily, but this is how you write for journals. And I do get sent half-baked pieces of work by all sorts of people, not just PhD students, and you think, I wish you'd spent a bit longer on that. I wish you'd sent it to a friend first. I wish you'd taken it through somebody else who said, sharpen this up a bit. Think about your readership. Because I can't do all that work for you in the journal. I can't do all of the sharpening. I use the reviewers, but quite often you might not get accepted. And I think that's very hurtful. So my tip would be, make sure you're sending your very good work and make sure it's been through your supervisor and been through a critical friend and that it's as good as it can get before you send it to an editor to go out to reviewers. Don't give them something. Somebody asked me in a workshop a few weeks ago about this, and she said, can I just send it off and then the reviews will help finish it? And I said, well, I think you might have an unpleasant experience. Because if it's not ready, if you don't think that's my best thing, then they might attack it like a bunch of piranhas. And you might be so upset, you might not try again. So do your very best and take it through some critical friends before it goes out. Another time I talked about this with a group of young early career researchers, and one of them said, I wish I hadn't had that published then, because it wasn't my best work, and I feel a bit embarrassed about it. So she got in, but she still felt, that's not so good for my academic career. So, very good work, polish it as far as you can, just like your PhD, before you send it in, and much more likely to get published. And then you can work with the reviewers, and then you can build up a whole series of publications. So Anthony Paré then says, you know, that you might cut into your research momentum, but also present work which isn't yet ready to share to a public audience, and it can have negative effects on your confidence and reputation. So don't be too eager to send everybody everything. Okay, so there's some warning thoughts about this. So here's another few questions for you. I'm not going to ask you to talk to each other about these. I just want us to keep them in mind as we move on. Are you seeking or achieving why are you seeking and achieving publication? What are the issues for you? Why do you want to get published? What are the pitfalls and the benefits? This is what we're going to be looking at now. What are the strategies to enable you to get published? Are you going to publish from your PhD during its completion? I think you do here, don't you? Yeah? How many articles are you meant to get published? 2. Scandinavia, it's 4. 4. Wow. And you hand the PhD in as well. 2. 2's a lot. Or are you going to get published after its completion? Well, yes, of course. And what do we know about the system? So these are my questions that underlie what we're doing this morning. Why are you doing it? What are the problems? What are the benefits? During, after. So publishing during the PhD and from the PhD are important for students who need and want to get into the world of publication, whether you become an academic or seek recognition in the professional world into which your work feeds. You might not be an academic, but people now in professional contexts who hire you for whatever job will be impressed if you've already got a foot in the door of publication in your area. You've made some sort of statement that's been recognised. And it's essential for sharing work and being recognised as a specialist, and also for entering the dialogue, which is knowledge creation. You've created something new, you need to share it. So you need to know that it's worth sharing. And thinking about the dissemination. So when you get to the question about dissemination, you need to start thinking, where am I going to publish it? And we'll go on to that a bit later, because if you publish it where no one can ever read it, that's nice, but you're not disseminating really, you're just publishing for the sake of it. We did some research into doctoral learning between 2007 and 10, and people who were involved in that commented on the importance of getting published before the viva. So this is quite a lot of this was supervisors and examiners, because they said that it gave students the confidence that they were already part of that academic dialogue in the field. If you've been published, I have to say as an examiner, I go through everything and I have a quick look at the back, and if I can see that that student has already published something, I feel, well, they've been accepted as a peer in the subject area already. So, you know, I feel impressed by them. And yet I know the research and I know why I'm being impressed. But they've already moved on. They've already got published. So people who've been published before their viva have confidence. They're already part of that dialogue into which their work fits. And they've already been accepted as an equal by their peers through the peer review process. When you go into the viva, you feel more confident. The examiner feels more confident about your work. No one has ever said otherwise. I really think this is true. So you'll feel, okay, whatever you say, I've already been peer reviewed. Other people just like you think my work's good enough. And that helps when you go into a viva. But it can detract from writing the PhD. Okay, what are the stages and what are the kinds of publication? You can publish your own PhD. So it can be published as a book. You could do it yourself if you had a few £1,000s. Probably better to do it through a publisher so that it doesn't sit in your back room in a pile in boxes and you can't get rid of it. Publishers will enable you to market your work, so it's not merely published, it's sent elsewhere, it's sold elsewhere. But there are some publishers, there's 3 publishers that I know of in the European context who will take a PhD without you making any changes. You just need to make sure it looks good for publication. Rodopi, Edwin Mellon Press and Peter Lang. One's in Wales and 2 are in Holland, in the Netherlands. Rodopi, Edwin Mellon, Peter Lang. Peter Lang might actually even contact you with an email offering to publish a PhD. With Rodopi and Edwin Mellon, you will also have to go through a process whereby reviewers and editors on their board approve your work before they publish it. And you might have to pay them something. But none of these are vanity presses. Have you heard the term? Vanity press. And that's where you publish yourself. These three are not vanity presses, they're respectable presses. They send their work to libraries. People buy them from mail order catalogues. You can get them off Amazon. Edwin Mellon, Rodopi and Peter Lang. Okay. But the downside is they don't have very big distribution, actually. And when you read one to review it, you are aware that it's a PhD. Why does that matter? It's actually a different shape to a book. So I've advised one of my PhD students and one of my research fellows to publish with Peter Lang when they emailed them, because I said, you've got your first book and you haven't had to do very much. You just had to make sure it looks good. And they both got them out, and they got them out very fast. So they've got a book, and now they can build the rest of their academic careers on the book. But it is a PhD, and so, now you must think about the shape of a PhD here, and so there's an enormous amount of stuff about literature reviews and a huge amount of self-defense about why you're doing it, the way you're doing it, and why it matters. An awful lot of explanation about methodology and methods before you get to what the student or the published author found. A PhD is an awful lot of other people's stuff before you get to your stuff. Yeah? Different shape to an ordinary book. An ordinary book situates what you're doing and gets onto your new contribution quite fast, and that's why we're buying it. So when you review one of those, you are aware it's a PhD. It's still respectable, but it's a different shape. Normally, to publish your PhD, you will have to change the shape. Okay? You'll have to make it what you found instead of what other people have done and why you're doing it the way you're doing it. What you found is why people want to read a book. So it's a different shape to your PhD. Any problems or questions about that? Because that's really what we're going to talk about quite a lot. It is a different thing. No? Okay? Right, so, excuse me. If you stop a buzzing phone. Put it on the seat. Right, so publish the PhD as a book. You can do that. You can publish as part of the PhD, which is the Scandinavian or scientific model, and Manchester University does this as well. The shape of that is you are developing essays, so essay development, journal article, trajectory or journey. So if you're publishing essays from your PhD as you go, then each one of them needs to go through the process of being a perfectly formed journal article. It isn't just a bit of your PhD. You might publish alongside your PhD, make sure it's related to what you're doing and doesn't stop you doing your PhD. You might publish from the PhD when you've finished, and this is about selecting appropriate bits of it. Usually, you won't be able to publish, if you're publishing it in bits, you won't be able to publish each bit. Nobody I know wants to just read your introduction as a publication. They're not interested. What they want is some of the important things you've found in a journal article with an appropriate introductory section and an appropriate conclusion. Each journal article is a bit like a mini PhD. You can't take chunks out of your PhD and get each chunk published. Nobody usually wants to read your literature review just like that, although some journals will take a literature review. Nobody wants to just read your methodology and the defense of why you did it the way you did it, unless you're making a real contribution to methodology. Mostly people want to read about what you found in a theorized manner. So mostly you're writing journal articles which have a bit of an introduction, a bit of a literature review, a little bit about methodology, what you found, and conclusions. That's the shape of a journal article. Abstract, introduction, literature review, methodology. They're not that big. and then what you found and why it matters, and a conclusion. So you can't take each chapter of a PhD and publish it separately. Editors don't want that. They want each article to be a well-shaped contribution to knowledge. Okay, so that's about developing essays into journal articles. Then you might turn it afterwards into a book, but remember that they want to know really what you found, rather more than all that background literature review methodology stuff. That's got to be important, but that's not the main reason you buy a book. And the final version, which is used quite often for people who've got a really established career, is a PhD by publication. Have you heard of that? So my boss and my dean at my previous university, where Jill and I used to work, and Jill is still working, both of them decided that they would publish their PhDs, if you like. They get their PhDs, but what they're going to do was draw on articles that they've been writing for the last 10 or 15 years. So they went back over what they'd already published another couple of things, and developed a PhD out of the publications. So they had to retrospectively consider what the overall themes and arguments were. Depends where you are in your career. I suspect that's not an option for anyone here, but it is an option if you've got an older friend who would like to have a PhD and has published a lot but just not done a PhD yet. There's a lot of people like that in the UK. They didn't work for a PhD, but they've been publishing. And so the advice is, pull it together now, turn it into a PhD. You've got to write around it, pull out the themes. But if you've already got the publications, it's worth doing. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to talk to each other. What do you want to do? What are the issues I've raised here? How do they relate to you and your publication decisions? So I'll ask that as a question. So a couple of minutes to think about you. I went through lots of things about what you're going to publish and where and how and why, books, articles, and I want you to talk to your neighbour, just 2 or 3 minutes. What do you want to do with your publishing from the PhD? Do you want a book? Do you want articles? Do you want to do it now? Afterwards? Both? What issues have I raised for you? Things about editors and processes. Just a couple of minutes. Some noise, please. Talk. Okay, I'll stop you. Just a few thoughts, and then I'm going to roll on through some text thoughts about this that I've got, which really are just what I've been saying to you. So any thoughts, questions, queries, surprises? Yeah, okay, the same people. Yeah, quick one.
Sometimes after proof copy that we send to the publisher, and I make mistake, but this occurs for me after paying or payment. sometimes they don't care about the collection that we send, the final collection that we send for them. And maybe, I don't know, especially if the tables are big or is too many information, then they don't care about the numbers, for example, whether it's in the specific and right location or not.
Okay,
And
okay.
for readers, it's very
Yeah.
important.
Right. So actually that's a major issue. The major issue is when you're paying to have something published, you expect to have it really finished off properly, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So we want a quality experience. We had a person down here, and then we'll go to you. Yeah, hang on.
Whatever we discussed with each other, I mean, my neighbor and I, it is out of this scope.
Mm-hmm.
According to him, he is going to have a patent, for example, or invented something in the future. But because the period of patent taking a lot of time, he prefers, for example, to forget having a patent, just go through publication. So this is another point.
It's a common problem if you work with patents, because if you publish it, you won't, you're not now in the run for a patent. So you're a court. You might be able to publish something which doesn't give away the major issue for which you're looking for the patent. But otherwise, you're stuck making that decision. I'll publish it or I'll get the patent. So I don't have a solution. So I'd say talk to your supervisors about your future career there. Sorry, yes, it's a tension. There are loads of tensions in this. It's not an easy game. Now we had somebody up there, guy in the purple shirt.
Some of the journal articles are actually taking longer time than expected in terms of reviewing. I remember we have experiences of like sending articles, and the due time, maximum due time is like 80 days, but it takes like up to 4 months. Just telling us some stories, be patient, because they rely on some excellent editors. And the second thing is, I just want to ask a question, not regarding to this, that is it allowed to publish your work first in articles, then after your PhD you can convert everything into the book?
Okay, the answer to that, I think, is a local answer. It's always a local answer. So I can't give you a straight answer. In some universities, if you publish before you hand in the PhD, you can't actually use that material in the PhD. And in some universities, you must publish before you hand in the PhD, and it's as if it's bound into it. So the Finnish doctorate colleague, whose work I examined before Christmas, sent me the book. It's a book, her PhD. That's how they do them in Finland. But elsewhere, if you published it, then it's considered already published, so you can't put it through the PhD. I don't know if you know the rules here. No, hang on. I'm asking the assistant dean.
In fact, for PhD, the students are asked to submit one and to publish one.
Yes.
And then for the book, it's just after the PhD. Then if you decide to make it as a book, then it's after the PhD.
Okay, so you wouldn't publish it. So you would not publish it as a book before your PhD. You would publish an article. To be honest, some of the Scandinavian PhD students have got 1 published and 3 in process, and that relates to how long it takes to get this thing accepted. But you do need to know, now I would say, check every item of the rule of the university to make sure that you don't end up stuck with a few things published and no PhD. But here it sounds as though you must publish, and that will be then part of your PhD. But you have to incorporate it back in. In Finland, it's 4 separate articles with a wrap. So you must find out the conventions in your subject area and here before you get on with this. Okay, otherwise you could get stuck. Right, I'm going to plough on. What I'm going to show you is I'm just going to read it, because it's what we've already said, but it might embed it a little bit for you. And then I'm going to move on to actually looking at websites. So it's expected for your PhD, and it'll be useful after achievement of the doctorate to help you get a job, if you've got publications. It'll give you confidence before and during the viva to support credibility in the field. And this comes from your position, which shifts slightly from being a novice or a student to being an early member of the collection of voices who are engaged with discussion and dissemination in your field. You actually go up the pecking order, up the academic recognition order once you start publishing, because people see you as somebody who's been accepted by respectable people in the field as having something to say. So it's worth doing for your whole career. Why? Peers have reviewed it already, they've commented on it, supported and accepted some of your work. So it's already achieved the criteria of a scholarly contribution to knowledge, which is expected of the PhD. You're hitting the right level. So actually you've got more confidence about the PhD, as well as you've entered the realm of publication. Once it's published, it's an indicator of the sophistication and acceptance of your contribution to knowledge and the field. It enables feedback and confidence, particularly for you, your supervisor and the examiner. Everyone feels more confident about you as a contributor. Can I just say, if you like taking notes or pictures, please do, but I'm going to show you the website where I put this. So that all of this is freely available on a website, and as soon as I've ploughed through a few PowerPoints, which is just me reading out loud, I'll show you the website, because I've actually got it today. I've gone online, and you can download everything from it, including not only these PowerPoints, but also a podcast of me talking about it. So if any of that's useful, or you want to share it with people, just take it and hand it out. So that's where it all is. So stages then. We have to identify and design projects or part of a developing thesis which can lead to publishable outputs. When you're looking at your thesis and you're thinking which bits are going to be publishable, not just how do I do my research and how do I write this thing so it's going to be acceptable, but which bits are going to be publishable, something else that goes on in your head. You need to plan and manage that piece for publication. It has to be as perfect as you can get it. You need to find and research suitable publication outlets, journals usually, but it might be trade papers, depends on what you work in. If you're a nurse, you might want to publish in something like Nursing Times, where within 10 days, 2 weeks, somebody's going to read that cutting-edge work that you've done. If you're an ordinary academic, it might take up to 2 years to see your work in print, but there are other ways in which you can see it published. So, and one of you talked about that the length of time it takes to get out there. You need to bear that in mind when you decide where you're going to send your work. You also need to seek some support, and you need to pick which bits of the thesis to publish. And you need to remember that you write and rewrite and edit it over and over and over again to make it just ready to go. And then it comes back and you make lots of corrections and you hope that they're incorporated in the final text so it does you justice. And then, you know, just before you send the final thing off, you're going to have to probably completely rewrite it because of the reviewers. So you write it, you submit it, it's as good as it can get, the reviewers comment, you rewrite it, you then copy edit it, you make it absolutely perfect, you send it off, and then it comes out. What? Ensure you've got the right length and focus, because these are important. People need to want to read this. Select the appropriate elements to turn into a journal article. And that actually can aid the focus of your whole PhD. When you realise you've got something important in there, that can help you balance your PhD around this important thing you have to say. But the PhD is so big, it's quite daunting to see what the main points of it are. And if you write some journal articles, it helps you remember what the main points of the PhD are. So it can be productive all the way through. Once it's finished, you've got to get it out. In itself, it can be a publication, picking the right articles for the journals, and whether you want to make it into a book. That's what that's about. Substantial piece of blah, 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 all of that. Wait a minute. But the readership of your PhD is different to the readership of your journal article. Why? Why is it a bit different? You've got to think about that, and I'll tell you the answer. The people who read your PhD are your supervisor, 3 if you've got them here, you're lucky, your examiners, and your mum. And during the course of your academic career, you could force it on a few students, right, or bits of it. But the people who read your journal article are already experts in the field, or they're somebody else's students who want to find out about cutting-edge work. And so, you know, the readership's a bit different. And the PhD, as I said, is heavily weighted with the introduction, the literature review, and the methodology before it gets into what you found and why it matters. And the journal article starts with that. It's got to be perfect, but they're really interested in what you've got to contribute. So it's a slightly different balance. They want to read your specific contribution to a field in which they have a specialist interest. Probably your mum won't read that, but you never know. You can try. Production of an essay or an article is like a mini version of an element of a PhD. It's in a mini PhD shape, and it enables a sharp focus down on what the contribution to knowledge is, and it gives you practice in how to structure your work in a manageably sized piece, usually 5,000 to 7,000 words. PhD, 80,000. Article, 5,000 to 7,000. You've really got to focus, but that exercise in focus translates into really being able to focus in that bigger piece of work. So it's really good practice. Blah, blah, what do you do? Okay. Helps you open up the work. Each essay or article's got its own structure. I'll leave this to go online, we've said it already. Simply cutting up the chapters into essays won't work. Each article's got to have an introduction, an abstract's got to have a bit of a lit review specific to that article. It's got to have defense of the methodology and methods, but not all of it, only enough for the article. I'm spending a lot of time at the moment back home in Brighton helping people turn their MA dissertations, which are smaller than your PhD, into publishable articles. They don't want to lose any word. Each word they sweated over. They don't want to lose any word, but they can't pack it all into the article. So I just said you've got to leave the dissertation or PhD there and now create this new perfect thing which only represents a part of its erudition, but is perfect and ready to go. We don't want the whole of your defence of your literature. But they find it hard. So I'm making it sound easy, but I know working with each individual, it's very hard. So don't beat yourself up. Take enough time and try it out. But you will have to lose some of those valuable words to make a perfect journal article. Set the scene, outline the range of responses, locate your contribution, and all of this needs to go into the essay. Okay. That's the bits they really want to look at are likely to be the different themes which have emerged from your data analysis. Usually, you'll find about 3 things in your PhD, and they probably form 3 major chapters, or if you're a scientist, they might come in one big lump that you also discuss, and then you have a discussion chapter. So those 3 major things that you found, might be 4, might only be 2, they're likely to be good articles. So the thematic stuff is usually what you can turn into an article with introduction, lit review, methodology, and then what you found. For instance, if you're writing a PhD on 3 writers in the Gothic, each chapter on each writer, if that's the way you've done it, could be turned into an article. So they're all about the Gothic, and you've got 3 chapters. Each one of these can be an article with a bit of an introduction, a bit of a lit review, maybe methodology, but not much if you write in the humanities, and then all you've got to say about this writer. Don't give them everything else. Or you might have done your 3 writers and you've got 3 themes. So 3 themes. Each of your articles is a theme. So you really need to visualise what you've got going in the PhD that can be taken out into an article. This is 5 minutes work. How could your PhD be developed into articles now? Where might you consider sending them? So what bits of it do you think you should write now-ish, now until October or something? Where might you consider sending them, and what support and development would be useful? I would like you now to concentrate and talk with each other for about 5 minutes and consider these questions. These are the big serious questions. What are you going to write? Where are you going to send it? What's going to help you do it? I want a lot of noise now, please. 5 minutes. Okay, I think that's about 5 minutes. Thoughts, questions from this? Anyone come up with any decisions? What are you going to develop? Where are you going to send it? What would be useful? Yeah? Just in front. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think we have to look at the discipline. The place that I'm going to send it as social science is totally different from the person who is science or medicine. So this is the place. And the importance of the publisher regarding to, although some of them takes time, but the reviewer is very important. And maybe I do not completely know who they are, but the record and the, let's say, importance of that journal in the field. How many articles have been published already? Are published there? Maybe key figures of my own field. So this can be recognized as a credit to my work if I'm going to publish in that journal. And the support and development refers, it is during the PhD candidateship. So peer group and asking other students or supervisor, co-supervisor, or the people who have a finger in it. Yes. Any of them can be a support.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who's hiding there? Okay. One more, and then I'll plough on and pick up from what you were saying.
Thank you very much. Actually, in my own case, I felt like how could I develop article from my PhD work actually depends on how much do I achieve before the end of my PhD. Like right now, I'm in the third semester, so it's like the whole concept is how much result have I gotten. I mean, out of my objectives, am I able to compare a very good work?
Yes.
If I can do that, then that idea can actually work on me. And where I supposed to send my paper actually also depends on the content, the result, the quality. I cannot just think of sending my paper to Nature or something or thereabout. So I have to think of what actually did I develop, to what level, because we have different tiers of journals. Yes. So I have to consider the quality of my work, and I think of where to send my paper.
Right. Most of the answers there are just one point because you're sitting next to him, and then I'll build on it. Yeah?
Yeah, one point that I considered sending the paper, I considered the number of issues per year. Because I assume that it could send back the comments earlier and sooner.
Depends where they are. Yes, you had a point. Yes.
I mean, it depends on the stage where we are writing, whether it is a conceptual paper, a review paper, or it is a paper with findings. So I think either one might do. But of course, the interesting part will be the findings.
Yes, yes. So lots of things there. Choosing what to do. You might do a lot, but it might not be publishable. So it might be the golden nugget that you find that you construct your essay around. Or you might want to write a conceptual piece. Some places do publish literature reviews. Or you might want to wait until you've got really important findings, take a chunk of them and construct an article around that. Don't publish too soon. Do publish your best stuff. Right? So all of these things you're clearly picking up on. And now you've all gone onto that central question, but some of you went onto the support issue. And I'm going to talk now about where to send it and why. So you talked about journal rankings. So you need to keep, first of all, there are different disciplinary differences in what's published and in what journals will take your work, clearly. But there are also huge areas in each discipline. So your researchers, the first thing you have to do is research the field of journals that you think might take your work. I spent the best part of a summer doing this kind of work so that I would be able to spot where to systematically send my work, because I'd just been sending it, with my friends. And one summer I thought I now have to be very focused. So I researched a range of journals in the field, and I researched a very, very prolific, successful writer in my field, and I watched what she did. So look at the places, look at what they say they take, follow their rules, and follow a few successful, prolific writers who you respect, and look what they do in their academic career. And do the same thing. So have a schedule of where you're going to send things, what they're going to be, and what bits of your work you're going to send. So I'm going to take you into a journal in a minute. But what I did with this person that I researched, then I told her that I researched her work, so I'm going to tell you who she is. Her name is Lynn McAlpine. She's a Canadian and she works at Oxford. She works in higher education. We both know Lynn McAlpine, Jill and I. And I watched the fact that she publishes 5 articles a year, every year, in 5 different places. She might use the same 5 places one year as she does the next year, with 5 different people. Isn't that clever? I hadn't spotted it, but I was picking this up, so I did the research. 5 articles a year, 5 different journals, with 5 different co-authors. So, citation rate, people follow her work. Good citation rate. She brings on doctoral students. If you write with Lynn, I can watch your journey go, and I can see that you're now working in a good university and publishing with someone else. So she deliberately publishes with very good doctoral students, helps their career, helps her career. Goes to these 5 different journals, because actually in 1 year, no journal wants to see you twice, even if you're good, because they want to let other people in. So she doesn't flood any one journal. And she knows that different journals take different aspects of the work she's doing with these different doctoral students. So she'll direct something that's very practical to this journal, something that's very theoretical to that journal, something that develops a conversation in her research a bit further to that journal, and so on. So if you plan this, if you research it and you plan it, and you're good at that because you are researchers, you're going to be a lot more successful than if you do what I did, and that is send things off every now and again and hope they were all right. It's not quite that bad. But I now do what Lynn does. And that meant I churned out good stuff that went into the research excellence framework. And I know I did it because I was being very focused. And we co-write quite a lot, Jill and I, so we might talk about co-writing at some point and the dynamics of that. Okay, so be focused and research where to send it. I'm going to go into a journal website and just take you through the piece of research that I did on a journal, and I'm going to pick the journal that I know best, which is the one that I work with, and show you that everything you need is actually already on the website. Can you hear me if I do it from here? Yeah? All right. So the journal that I do is published by Taylor and Francis. Journals now are quite often in the world at large, if you like, apart from local journals, published by huge conglomerates. They have massive groups of journals. Have a look at them first. Taylor and Francis is one of them. Sage do a whole load of things. Oxford University Press do a lot of things. You'll know the names. You'll know the names because you have a look at where you write, where you read. Which journals do you read? Start with them. Go and have a look at what they say they're doing. So I've set this up so it ought to work. We go into the journal listings bit. Up there. We browse the journals. Now, if I'm trying to think which education journal I want to write for next, I seem to have 254 choices. Well, that's going to be good. That'll keep me going for the rest of my life. But sadly, they don't all want to publish what I write. An awful lot of these journals publish things about primary school children, and I couldn't write one of those to save my life. Get the right journal. In the journal that I edit, half the things we turn down are because they're actually not for our journal. They send me things on secondary school children. Why do they do that? They went on the website, they'd see we never publish that. Read carefully what that journal publishes, what its niche is, and direct your work at it. You'll find there's at least 5. There's probably 10 in the world that you can really send it to and have a chance of getting in. So don't start with the equivalent of Nature. That's where you want to be if you're a scientist in the end. But if you start with Nature, you've got to know that you've got a world-breaking piece of work that they have got to publish. Now, you might get that in. If everyone tells you that piece of work is that good, then do start with Nature. Because I don't want to squash you. And they do publish new researchers. And Nature has a very high turnover and an incredibly high citation rate. Because every scientist reads it in particular fields. So if you get your work in there, you will be known. Everyone will read you. That's what they read first. So the top journals they read first. But the top journals are the hardest to get in. So it might be best not to start with a top journal, but take advice. And the reason for not starting with a top journal is it's really very hurtful if they reject you. And if you do some corrections and they reject that, and then they reject the corrections on the corrections, and they reject the corrections on the corrections, and finally, after you've rewritten it 6 times, they still don't want it. You feel as though you never want to write again. So maybe don't set yourself up for that. I did. The first education piece I ever wrote, I sent to Studies in Higher Education, which is the best journal in higher education. I rewrote it 6 times and they still didn't want it. And so I sulked and got upset, this is a long time ago, and decided I hated them and didn't want to read them. And I sent it to Studies in Continuing Education. And I had to change 1 paragraph, because already this was a very good piece, because I'd rewritten it 6 times, and it came out there. So if the top journal doesn't want it, find the 2nd and the 3rd. Keep going, that's a good piece of work, someone will want it. Use what you learned from the reviewers. And then maybe don't send your next piece to Studies in Higher Education until you really have got something important to say. So 15 years later, I did send them something else. All right, so which education journal out of 254? Well, for me, it's got to be a higher education one. So I fiddle around and I eventually find this alphabetical list. And I know of 5 journals that I read, so I go and look at all of them. So I've decided to have a look at the one that I edit, because that's going to be a lot quicker for me. It's that one. Well, interestingly enough, it's a journal of an association. It's in an open access agreement, which means that if I've done a large funded project, I will pay a lot of money to have my journal article published there so that you can read it straight away. Anything else that I publish or you publish in it will go green open access within about 18 months, and then you can probably get hold of it. Normally you're going to get hold of these articles through a library firewall unless you're a subscriber. You know about this though, yeah? So who's going to read it? People who can get to the library where they're subscribing, people who subscribe. And after a while, it might come up as a special, or after a while you might be able to tag it to your website if you've written it. So getting it out there is not the only answer. People have got to be able to get to it. So you find out those sorts of things about journals. So that's not so bad. The other thing, it's got peer review integrity. You need to have all these stamps on the journal you go for. The other thing that's not on here, but is the case, is that if you publish with this journal, it comes out online first before it comes out in hard copy. If that's not true of the journal you want to publish in, I'd think twice about it. Lots of journals now come out online first. It's the same article in the same shape. But they come online first in about 2 months of you writing them and being accepted. So Jill and I were sitting at the Quality Postgraduate Conference 2 years ago. That's where we're going next in Adelaide. And I got very excited because I had an email and it said, our article had been accepted. And, you know, we'd written it like a year ago on data that we'd collected the year before. So it was already quite old in our minds. So we found out we got it accepted. We found out we got it accepted in 2012 in April. And they said, you'll be so pleased that your article's been accepted because it will be published in October 2014. So it hasn't come out yet, and we're just about to go to the conference again. But luckily, the bottom of the email, I thought, I give up. The bottom of the email said, but it will come out in iFirst. And it was out in iFirst within 3 months. So it's out online almost immediately, but we still haven't seen it 2 years later. So pick somewhere where it'll come out online, because otherwise you'll give up the will to live pretty quickly. Okay, that's just a turn of phrase. So, how often is it published? Yes. If the frequency is more than twice a year, you're more likely to get out quicker because they have to turn around more quickly. We've just gone to 6 issues. We were 4. Studies in higher education is now 8 issues. Still going to be hard to get in though. How are you going to find out whether you want to publish for them? Have a look at what's in the most recent one. Are they publishing things you're interested in? I mean, you're all going to say no, but I'll say yes. Peer learning. All right, maybe. Perceived difference between assessing at master's level. Supporting medical students to do international field research. Peer mentoring. Is it a journal which takes writers who come from somewhere other than the country in which the journal is published? Is it an international journal? So if you want to write and publish more than locally, find somewhere that regularly publishes international authors. Quite often it's a good idea to publish with someone for whom English is their first language, so that together you can help the language be pretty well perfect when you hand it in. I published with a group of Swedish colleagues who are all, 2 professors in the group. And once we've looked at the work together, one of my jobs is to de-Swinglish it. De-Swinglish it. So I then turn into someone who makes sure that the Swedish English is English English. But I've done some other work, research work first. So make sure they take international authors. Make sure you're writing with somebody who can help you with the English if that is an issue, or that before you send it in, it goes through English first speaker text editing or if you're very confident, it might be okay. Because it still will be an issue in some places, right? Just don't set yourself up to fail. So these are the things that people are writing about, changing academic teaching, right, all this stuff. If that's exciting for you, then you might want to have a look at a sample copy, but you can't, not from here anyway. You might want to have a look at a sample copy and see everything that they've written in one edition. So you can then read an individual article and have a look at what the layout is, the way in which they argue in this journal, the conversations that are going on, all those sorts of things. Can you enter a conversation that's in this journal? How do they lay out their articles? So that's a current issue. The thing on latest articles, most read articles, you can quite often get them. There's usually a run of articles on the right-hand side that they'll let you read for free. Can't see it at the moment. And they'll also give you information. This might not work, but we'll try. Authors and submissions. Instructions for authors. Why has it suddenly done that? It was all right earlier. Sorry? Sorry? Yeah, but this is just the instructions. And I loaded this earlier, it's just it's gone down now. So I just have to tell you, and I wish I'd loaded that bit when it was working, but it won't work anymore. But anyway, if you go into authors and submissions, it will tell you, this is the length of the journal articles that we take. These are the kind of things that we're interested in, so it'll give you the range of issues. It'll also talk about the layout of figures and the layout of images. And it will probably, if it has a format where you have to lay your abstract out in sections, it will tell you about that too. So find the journals you're interested in and read that bit. This is all freely accessible. It shouldn't be going through the library because it's not actually reading an essay. So it's just that the web link's gone down for some reason. So if you go into that area, it'll tell you absolutely everything that you have to do to write your article so that it looks like one that already fits in the journal. Because that's the big clue. I know this is obvious, but it takes a long time. You write it differently for every journal. So if you send it to me, and in the end it's been through the peer review process, so you send it to me, I read it, I say, well, I don't know why you wrote about secondary schools, why don't you send it there? But I do that politely. Or I say, thank you for this. And then you've already sent it in through the, and I can't get online obviously to show you this, you send it in through an electronic process. Who's done this? Who's sent things in through Scholar One? Anybody? One person, two people. Okay, nowadays you're quite likely to email the editor and say, I've got something on this, would you be interested? So they've got you in mind. But the actual article goes up on an electronic process through something called Scholar One, which you'll find out about through reading about the journal or reading about Taylor and Francis. So you upload a whole essay without your name or institution, a whole essay with your name and institution, some biographical details, and stuff about have you got images in it or whatever. So that usually takes, the first time you do it, that can take you several hours. So you've uploaded it, it's arrived, I've seen it's about secondary schools, I wish you'd read the site, we now politely reply that you should think about sending it there. Or it arrives, I look at it and I think, hey, that looks like one we'd like, and now I find 2 reviewers for it. That's what I do as an editor. But other editors ask other people to do that. They have sub-editors who decide who the reviewers are. You decide who the reviewers are because they're people who've been reviewing for you before. They're people who've published in the journal before. They're people who have offered to review, who you feel are respectable in the field. And you ask them to review it. You send it to them. Anybody reviewed? Who's reviewed for a journal? Hands up. One of the first ways into getting published in a journal is to review for it. when you're at a conference or when you're reading this journal, why don't you email the editor and say, I really admire your journal, and I've been reading several articles in it. My specialism is this. I'm an early career researcher, but I would very much like the opportunity of reviewing if you have any article in my area. They might think that's cheeky and not even respond. But I and some other people would say, thank you for doing that. How nice. We'll put you on the reviewer list. And we'll couple you with somebody who's done a lot of reviewing. Right? So you are thinking, you're starting to learn to review for that journal. I got to edit that journal because I reviewed for it. And then I wrote for it. And then they needed someone to edit it, co-edit it, and then edit it. So it's a step in. And it's quite interesting, reviewing, because you find out how someone else writes for that journal. And you usually think, I could do that. And then you have a go. So reviewing is the first step in. It takes a lot of time. Be cheeky, offer yourself, and do the review on time. Reviews are about that long. They're not that long. And they're not that long. Right? So don't overdo it. Be very professional, but don't underdo it. And review according to their rules. If you review something, you speed the process up and you get credibility. So I think that's one way in. That's one thing about support. Okay, so we send it off to reviewers. You've just sent it in now. It's April. We send it off to reviewers and they get them in May. They're a bit busy, so we don't get anything back from them until September. That's rather a long time. So we got the reviews back in September. We now send to you what the reviewers say you need to do to your work. If they've been extremely rude, we'll rewrite it. If they haven't been particularly rude, we'll send it to you and we'll include a cover note. Some reviewers don't know how to review, they just know how to be nasty. So if you get some of those, you also have to find out what you can learn from what they've said. So you get the review. At home I walk round the garden thinking, I hate them, they don't understand how brilliant I am, I'll never write for that place again. And then I go back to the review and I see that actually it's not that bad. So my first response, I've talked to lots of academics about this, the first response is always, you're a bit upset because they didn't understand how good your piece was. And then you look at what they say and you have a look at what you can do quickly, cosmetic stuff, typos, lack of a reference, misphrasing of something here, and then what is substantive. So you look for the cosmetic stuff you can do quickly and what is seriously important, which maybe is revisit your data set. I don't understand how you've used that theory. The argument here needs really being much clearer. The argument needs to be clearer all the way through. You haven't really emphasized what the newness of your work is. So there might be something seriously important that needs to be done to your work. So now you set yourself a schedule of when you're going to do that work. So speaking to you as an author then, you need to take review as part of the development of your writing process. And just do what they tell you to do, but really think about it. Because if you only do quick changes, the reviewers reread this thing and they get a bit cross about that. So your reviewers, who are busy people, get your article back, so you know what they said in September, you sulk a bit, you rewrite it, you send it in November. The reviewer gets it again, and they usually get a version that's track changes, and they can see a bit of highlight here and a bit of highlight there, and they say, they did not address the things I told them to do in the review. So do what they tell you to do, unless you disagree with them, and you have a really good reason why not, and then you defend that in your response to the reviewers. So you send back a rewritten piece, highlight the bits you've changed, and you send back a letter that tells the reviewer and the editor what you've done. what you've changed, and if you haven't changed it, why you didn't change it. Okay? So you have ownership of your article. Usually you'll be able to improve it, but there'll be some things you might disagree with, so tell them why not. This is good because it causes you to think about it again, this article. You send it in again, and we're now in November. The reviewer looks at it again over Christmas for us, so it comes back in January to you with a few more things to do. There have been things that we've written that have bounced back with 6 lots of things to do, but we don't let go now. We do them all until eventually they say, okay, we've run out of things to ask you to do, we're going to publish it. So be tenacious. Have the hide of a rhino. Keep going until you've done it as well as you can and it's ready to be published. So then you've got this business of how long before it's actually published. When it's published, even if you can't send it to everybody, though usually you have access to 50 electronic copies, check you've got that, you can send the 50 electronic copies to 50 people you think might find it useful. Tell people about it so that they want to read it. So they might get an electronic copy from you, they might go through the library and have a look at it. But if you don't tell people that it exists, they won't know to read it. They won't stumble over it that likely. Okay, so just to run back then, follow the careers of people who publish, whose work you respect. Look at where they publish. Look at places that you've read that you find are good. Research them. Write the right thing for that journal. Something else can go somewhere else. Research what they write, how they lay it out, so your piece looks as though it fits when it gets to the editor. It'll take a long time. When the reviews come back, sit with them and write, I can do this and I'll do that with it, I can do this, that's going to take me longer because that's serious, I'm going to open the work up and do that piece of work. But just draw yourself up a schedule of how you're going to deal with what the reviewers want. For the reviewers who are merely spiteful and ignorant, the editor should have said, I will take less notice of this than that. They should have helped you manage it. They don't always, but usually they do. So you're being selective about what you do, but respond, react, improve, send it back, and then tell people when it's out so they can read it. Okay, any questions from that little run through about publishing? Questions, thoughts? Did you know all that? Anyone want to say it's not like that at all? Or what if? No, you're all happy, yeah? Say it again, what is the benefit?
What's the benefit to being reviewer of a journal? Because for sure it takes a lot of time for doing that. The benefit of being...
All right, anyone want to indicate the benefits? Yes? Want to bring the mic down?
In fact, being as a reviewer, it helps the person to develop her or his critical thinking and expose herself or himself towards other aspects of the issue that even she or he might not take into consideration. So she or he looks at the view in a larger scope or even from the macro scope. So that is different, might be, even maybe conflict of interest might be there, but the person should be a little patient. But the main important things, I think, look at the things critically and trying to give constructive comments is the basic input.
If we didn't have peer reviewers, you wouldn't get published, because there would be nobody to deal with the work to help to improve it. It's part of the academic cycle. And so you need to get on that cycle. In fact, you're only taking if you don't give back through some peer review when you can. So that's one altruistic, kindly giving answer. It won't work academically unless we do review for each other. But you can get a lot from it, which is what you were saying. When you look at somebody else's work and you identify why it's successful and what needs to be done to it to make the argument stronger, the use of the data more coherent, the shape of it, the methodology more sound, that kind of critical perception you turn back straight into your own work. You learn a lot from the way other people write, provided you're not just dealing with helping them write, but you're also thinking, what am I learning from this? So you really do learn a lot from it. You also learn a lot about what they've said in the field. You will usually get sent things to review that are in your field. So you're part of the conversation. And then, as I said, it's a step on the academic ladder. We all do reviews for each other, and we also edit each other's work, and we read each other's work. And that's why it works. That's how it goes. There's no other reason for writing other than to be read and used. Is there? So we turn it round. We are our own readership and reviewing community. And we're an international community. So that's why it's worth doing. If that's all you did, you'd never get anything written. So don't do too much. Okay. I don't know what the real time is. 25 past 11. All right, we've got a few little things to do, and then I want you to have a look at some case studies, which I'll put up one at a time on here. So I'll just round this off a little bit. How can your PhD be developed? We said, where might you send them and what support would be useful? A little piece of research that was conducted in Hong Kong by an early career researcher noticed that students were often resentful about the amount of time it took to write for publication and just thought it was more work. And that's a bit like reviewing. This is more work, it's more work. It stops me doing my PhD. So, and what will help you do it? Well, there might not be any explicit in-house support for your writing for publication from your PhD. And supervisors are often the first person who takes this on to help support you. At Brighton, I run a Writing for Academic Publication module that runs twice a year, and I get a lot of PhD students on it. And they write an article that comes from their PhD. And I get a lot of academic staff on it who are writing articles from their research or professional practice. And the aim is to get a piece of work which is almost publishable at the end. And then later on, when they've got it published, they tell me about it. So you might want a module, not just a 2-hour session, where you systematically go through the creation and the peer review and the supervisor review and the refining of a piece of work for publication. Other instances, people run writing retreats to help people select from the PhD and turn a whole piece into a publication. Have I asked you how many of you have had an article published already? Did I do that at the beginning? Could you put your hands up if you've had an article published already? Okay, that's some of you, but not a load of you. One really good way of actually finishing a piece of writing is to have 2 or 3 days in a writing retreat where you take a piece that you've already done quite a lot of work on, and you have structured inputs, writing time, and then you critically peer review each other's work and then move on. Because actually writing an article through to completion for publication is a very long process. It takes ages. You won't get it done in a 9-to-5 piece of work, in a 9-to-5 job. It takes a lot of time and a lot of refining. But it's an exciting project. But go away and do it. Give yourself the time to do it. Get support to do it. And get internal support to do it. Because it takes really experienced academics a lot of time to get an article up for publication. So you could have writing support offered through the library or through writing centres, or you can set up your own writing circles. So I know groups, 3 of my ex-PhD students, who've all got their PhDs now, started publishing during the PhD, but mostly after the PhD. They're in a group called 4 Guineas. They've been together now, all of them, for about 15 years. They co-write and they deliver to and support and critically review each other's work. They're all churning out interesting things all the time and celebrating each other's writing. So they set that up themselves. Some of us go, yeah, it's great, let's have a look at it. So we're interested in what they're doing, and they continue to publish. So you can do it for yourselves, or the university can help you do it. Supervisors indicate that they ought to support the emotional processes of writing, resilience, perseverance, the confidence, the articulacy. They offer to co-write journal articles without stealing all the recognition. That discussion of that sometimes goes on for quite a long time, because I've met some students who've said, I did all the work, the supervisor co-wrote it, their name went first, or my name wasn't even on it. Don't get stuck with that problem. Make sure if you co-write with somebody that your names are both on it. If you've taken the lead, your name goes first. If they've taken the lead, their name goes first. Sometimes the decision about who goes first when you're in an academic career is to do with who it might benefit at that point. You've both done equal amounts of work. One of you goes first this time because you're up for promotion. But with supervisors, you need to know what the rules are in your discipline about whose name goes first. Sometimes the professor's name goes first, but in sciences, that often happens. But the people who read the article know that they're there because they're the leader of the project. And then they look for the next person down, and they know they're the person who did most of the work. And so there are all sorts of rules that relate to the disciplines about whose name goes first. But don't have your work stolen. Have it supported. Join other people. The supervisors can join students in conference presentations and book chapters. They can put people in touch with editors who are looking for reviewers. They can help students demystify the process of spotting the right journals. In other words, they can help you with the things that I've been doing with you. I suggest that you look through the web of knowledge or the web of science. I won't try and do that now because I think the internet won't let me. But if you go into the web of knowledge online and you type in a name of somebody whose work you've been reading, it'll bring up a list of the things that they've had published, and you get also the citation number. Okay, so some of you were interested in citations earlier. So if I typed Lynn in McAlpine in, it would be surname first and her own name second. Okay, and then I would have to refine her because there's 2 of them, and one works on parasites, but the other one works in higher education. So I refine it to get the right one. I'd then look at the things she's had published, and I'd look at how she's been cited. I'd look in the right-hand side, and I'd find out about the journal. And I'd look at where the journal is in terms of its impact factor. You know about these terms. Impact factor is a number that attaches to a journal. And it attaches to a journal every year and changes a bit every year. And it relates to how many times the articles in that year's worth of the journal have been cited. It does not attach to your particular article. You might have not been cited at all, but the journal you're in has a high impact factor or whatever, a low impact factor. Impact factor varies across the disciplines. So something like Nature has got an impact factor like 60. And that means that it's read a lot and it's cited a lot. So you really want to be in it. But I can never be in Nature because I don't write that stuff. So I have to look at the impact factor in my discipline. And the highest impact factor in higher education is in studies in higher education. And it's 9 point something. It's not 60, it's 9 point something. So that sounds like hardly worth the bother. but that's the top number. They change according to the discipline. So do that research. So decide where to send it, looking at citations, websites, follow an author, plan your own journey. Okay. Some dangers. Pushing forward your thinking out in new areas is always dangerous. Supervisors and students need to find out where to publish new techniques and new findings in different contexts. It's always dangerous, somebody might pinch it. Once you're published, they're less likely to pinch it, they've got to cite you. If you just deliver it at a conference, they might pinch your ideas and not cite them. So next year, you go to the conference and somebody's recycling what you said last year, but they don't mention you. So get it published. You've only yourself to blame. Right? Engaging with writing for an academic audience can cut across originality in the discipline because of compliance with the expectation of academic publishing. You might have to write in a certain way to get it published, and you might, like your patent, want to hold on to that originality and not publish your best stuff. Students who publish with a project group or their supervisor need to ensure they felt their work was still their own and they can clearly be seen on a joint publication, and don't get it hijacked. Okay. Some things people have said, problems, da-da-da-da, they're all right, that kind of thing, whatever. Start small. What might help you? You might be helped in your publication journal by producing posters first or writing for in-house journals. Have you got any in-house journals? Yeah? So the university publishes journals? Yes? So quite often, if a university can have an online in-house journal, you get used to writing for it, reviewing each other's work, maybe doing some editing, reading each other's work, and you've got a foot in the door, plus it's part of the list of things you've had published. No, it isn't an international journal, but you get there. So it's not a waste of time to go through these steps. Use peer support, send it to other people, send it to good critical friends who will help you make it better. Publish some of your work on blogs. Not all of it, just bits of it. Because blogs get out there in the international reading space and people know your name. For PhD students, there's a blog post called The Thesis Whisperer. Have you heard of that? Margaret might have told you. The Thesis Whisperer. It's a regular blog post about doing your PhD. All sorts of interesting things are in there. It's written by someone called Inga Mewburn, and she's at the Australian National University. So she first got known, she's an academic, because she constructed this regular blog. Every couple of weeks it comes out on the subject of doing your PhD, when you get stuck, what to do, the viva, delivering at conferences. So everyone knows her name now. So when she writes something, they know her name from the blog. So you're not giving it all away, you're starting to share. Rehearse your arguments on the blogs first and then publish. So it's like a notebook turned outwards. Da-da-da, whatever. Lots of stuff in there. What I think I'll do is, I think we've got all of it in here, is I'm going to ask you to have a look at the case studies, but I want to show you where I've put all the PowerPoints and things so that you can get to them. I hope, if this works, in a minute. Okay. A colleague who's technically able and I put together a website where I've put all these PowerPoints and some podcasts. It's called Oasis for Learning. You'll know you've got there because you'll see the camels. And if you look at the top, you need to copy that address down because there are loads of oases. So it's got a dash, oasis-for-learning.net. And it's working, so if you get in there, you'll see there's various groups. So just drop that down and go and have a look at it later. And the group that we're looking at is the writing group, but there's one on supervising, research support, learning and teaching, quality. Basically, it's not a complicated piece of work, it's just a lot of stuff I've put into it. Oh, no, it won't let me do it. Yes, it is. And I don't know why. How annoying. Oh, well, you saw it and then it died. Wait a minute. I think I might get... No. Well, okay. You saw it. It's called oasisforlearning.net. If you go into it and you go into the writing bit that I had highlighted for you up there. Go back to that. You'll find that there's podcasts on breaking writing blocks. There's podcasts on turning your PhD into a publication. And there's all these PowerPoints. And if you want to leave a comment, you can leave a comment. And you can download and use anything from it. So when you get hold of the internet, go into Oasis and take the PowerPoints down. So I think you probably had time to copy that. Yeah, we've got about 5, 6, 7 minutes. I want you to have a think about some of these case studies, which are about students and publication. Right. What are you going to do? Think of yourself as a supervisor giving yourself advice. Your student's quite weak in their methodology. Their data collection is still in its early stages, their work is untheorized, and they've written very little so far. They insist that it's necessary for them to publish journal articles now, and with your help, and want you to co-author. If you were the supervisor, what would you want to do with this student? Because this could happen to you as a student. You want to publish very early. No, don't do it. It's all right. There isn't time, but thank you anyway. Maybe for later. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you. What would you advise this student and supervisor? Yeah?
Suggest that for this stage you don't have any finding and also you are not write the review,
not an article. Okay, so it's too early, yeah? The student wants to publish, they're enthusiastic, they're very able. You don't want to give their work away too soon. But you need to say to them, just wait a bit. We can work together and then take it through the critical friends. But if you publish it too quickly, you'll regret it. And actually, you'll probably get it sent back. And then you'll feel as though your work's not good. It's just not ready. Okay, so that could happen to you. It will get better, but don't send it yet. You've got a strong student. This is the supervisor again. You're a strong student with good ideas and interesting original work. And they're developing. And they want to publish some early data. But you don't think the data's quite achieved its potential yet. I found this, I want to get it out. So if that's you, you've got some good stuff, you want to get it out. It's the same answer. Same answer is wait a bit. Wait until you've got something that really is significant to say, that you can argue for and write well about. And send that. Don't send something that's half developed. Right, this is all online and you can see it later. This is supervisor view. Someone else's student comes to you as a supervisor and suggests their supervisor's holding their publication back. All right. So you go to another supervisor. My supervisor's holding me back. The other supervisor might help you, but they also probably think that that supervisor knows that you need to do a bit more work before you get published. These are all hold you back ones. Okay. Publish in time, publish in the right places, publish the right thing. I just want you to now spend 1 minute reflecting and writing down for you. What have we done this morning that might be helpful, what might work for you? And what actions and ideas have you got? and maybe what you think the university should do. So the questions are, what might work here and for you in terms of publishing from your PhD? You got any ideas and actions? And is there anything you think the university can help you with? I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes. I want you to think and jot a couple of things down. What might work for you? Have you got any actions? Anything the university can do? Think and write. Okay, time's up. Anybody want to tell me what they're going to do or think the university might do to help? What are you going to go away and do next? Yeah? Or what have you started to think about? Yep.
To look at the prolific writers in my area.
Yep.
Look at the journals which I can write in.
All right. So look for those prolific writers. Give yourself a couple of hours. Find them. See who you read. See where they're published. See what the rules are. Can you send them anything? Because that's a good way in. It's the back door in. You're researching. Anything else anybody wants to go off and do? All right, have you got any bright ideas for the university? It's perfect, isn't it? You're all nurtured, you're all regularly publishing. You might decide to go and write with a friend. You might decide to share work with each other. You can always help each other's writing. And you might decide to write a short blog, or you might decide to write for an in-house journal, or you might decide to offer yourself for review. These are early stages. And you might also decide, this is the journal I want to aim at, and start working on that article and try and get it in there. And then let everyone know when you do, because it's a wonderful feeling when that piece of work that you've worked so hard on, that is your own work, comes back to you and you can see it in print, even if it's online first, and you know you did it. And it's really exciting. And there's just no other buzz like it, is there? No, we're always, when we co-write and it comes out, we get very excited about it, because it's taken a long time, and it's the mark of the achievement of your work. So go away and publish, and I've left my email address and Oasis on the board. Thank you. I hope to see you all in print.